Welcome, weary soul. Tonight, I'll be your storyteller, guiding you gently toward rest. Before we begin, remember to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. And if there's a story you want to hear next, I'd love to know. I was 22 when everything finally caught up with us. If I'm being honest, I'd already been living on borrowed time long before that night arrived. Back then, my mornings smelled like cheap coffee and stale cigarette smoke. I worked the opening shift at a small liquor store wedged between a pawn shop and an abandoned barber shop. Bars covered the windows, not for decoration, but necessity. You learn fast which customers you could joke with, and which ones you rang up quickly without making eye contact. Period. I wore a wrinkled polo with the store logo stitched over my chest, and played the part of a guy just trying to pay rent. That part was true. It just wasn't the full story. Most nights after my shift, I didn't go straight home. That's where they came in. I met most of them during slow hours, leaning against the counter, talking trash about the weather, local teens, or whoever had been arrested that week. We were all around the same age, early 20s, except for Roar. Roar was in his early 30s, maybe 32 or 33, but he carried himself like someone who'd lived twice that long. Calm. Grounded. The kind of presence that made people listen, even when he spoke quietly. Most of us grew up without fathers. Mine left when I was 10. Roar filled that space without ever trying. He'd been in the army, done tours overseas, seen things we couldn't pronounce. When he talked, we shut up. When he laughed, we laughed. When he said something felt wrong, we believed him. Most of the time. Roar had gotten out of county a few months before I started running with them. Drug charges. Nothing massive, but enough to put his name on a list. He wasn't a big dealer, not even close. But he had connections and ambition, which in our city could be worse than being powerful. The trade here was quiet, controlled. Same corners, same rules. Nobody made waves. Roar didn't have to try. Just existing rocked the boat. I knew I was different from the others. I still lived with my mom, helped with bills, stayed clean enough to avoid a record. She worked double shifts at a nursing home and still found the energy to worry about me. "You don't need those boys," she'd say, arms crossed in the kitchen. Nothing good comes from people who always have money but never have jobs. I'd nod, kiss her cheek, say, "I know, Ma." Then I'd meet them later anyway. Looking back, the only reason I stayed free, alive, is because I learned to listen to something inside me. Call it instinct, a gut feeling, God, luck. There was a quiet voice that told me when to walk away. I didn't always listen, but when I did, it saved my life. That night in 2011, it screamed louder than it ever had. Rain poured down hard, the kind that turned streetlights into blurry halos and made the air smell like wet asphalt. Roar picked me up in his old sedan, along with Lennox, Pierce, and C. C was the one who invited us out. Said there was a party, low-key, just drinks and music, at some apartment complex across town. "I know where it is," C said from the back seat, already buzzed. "Relax." Roar glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "You said that last time." Yeah, I got it now." We drove 20 minutes, then 30. C kept pointing left, then right, then telling Roar to turn around. The tension thickened. Lennox tapped his fingers against the door. Pierce muttered, "This is some bullshit." When we finally pulled into the complex, C pointed at a random building. "That's it, I'm sure." There was no music, no people, no laughter spilling into the rain, no flashing lights. "I'll check," I said, opening the door. Roar frowned. "Be quick." Walked toward the building, rain soaking through my hoodie. That's when I noticed another car parked just off to the side of ours. Engine running, windows dark. Something tightened in my chest. I took one more step, and that inner voice hit me like a shove. Stop. I didn't know why, but I listened. I stepped back behind the corner of the building instead of moving forward. I held my breath. 5 seconds later, the night exploded. Gunfire tore through the rain. Bright flashes lit the darkness. The sound was sharp and deafening, echoing off concrete.
I dropped to the ground, curling into myself, heart slamming so hard I thought it might burst. The shooting felt endless. Then tires screamed. The other car peeled out of the lot and vanished into the dark. I stayed frozen, convinced they'd come back. When I finally moved, my legs barely worked. I leaned around the corner, half expecting a bullet to find me. Roar's car was shredded with holes. The smell of gunpowder hung heavy, mixing with rain and blood. I opened the driver's door. Roar was gone. Blood soaked the seat, pooling beneath him. I gagged, fighting the urge to vomit. In the back, Lennox and Pierce were slumped over, motionless. I was about to close the door when I heard it. A breath. Faint. Wet. Barely there. Sai twitched. "Oh my God," I whispered. I yanked open the other door and dragged him out just as sirens wailed in the distance. Police and ambulances arrived seconds later, red and blue lights cutting through the rain. They questioned me for hours. I told them everything. At first, they doubted me. Then they saw the scene. I sat on the curb while body bags were zipped shut. 3 friends, gone. At the hospital, I waited with C's girlfriend. We didn't speak. Just before dawn, a doctor came out and told us C would live. 2 bullets in his liver, but he'd survive. No one was ever arrested. Years later, I heard one of the shooters took his own life. I didn't celebrate, but I felt something close to relief. After that night, I walked away from that life for good. Moved across town. New routines. New people. Sometimes I still think about Roar. About how close I came to dying for nothing. That inner voice never screamed that loud again. But I still listen. The first thing that comes back to me isn't the sound, it's the smell. Hot grease sizzling off the grill. Sugary smoke hanging low over the backyard. Fireworks snapping somewhere down the block. Sharp and hollow, like knuckles cracking in the dark. Late summer in Cinder Falls had a way of clinging to you. The air stuck to your skin, and every laugh, every shout, every careless noise seemed to travel farther than it should. I was standing by the back fence with a red cup sweating in my hand, half listening to my uncle laugh too loud. Everyone was pretending, smiling, joking, acting like this was just another family gathering. It wasn't. That night was Ryland's 18th birthday. The night he was supposed to start over. The night that took everything from us. Of course I didn't know that then. None of us did. If I had, if there had been even a whisper of warning, I would have grabbed Bree's hand and pulled her inside. I would have told Ryland to forget the truck, forget the party, forget the idea of celebrating anywhere people could see him. But life doesn't warn you in a way you can hear over music. It just happens. Ryland had always been trouble. Not cruel, not broken, just restless, like something inside him never sat still. He was always pushing, always testing how far he could go before someone stopped him. The first time was when he was 7. Sticky fingers, wide eyes, dragged back to my aunt's house by a police officer who looked more exhausted than angry. "Candy bar," the cop said, rubbing his face. "Dare. No charges, just a warning." After that came the fights. Playground scracks turned into suspensions. Broken noses. By 13, he was sneaking into locked pools with older kids. By 15, people started whispering about who he was hanging around with, about faces his parents never saw in daylight. Uncle Holt tried everything. Calm talks at the kitchen table. Long drives where he said nothing, just waiting for Ryland to break the silence. When that failed, the shouting came. Doors slammed. Voices cracked. Aunt Maribel cried herself hoarse most nights. The worst part? Ryland didn't come from a broken home. He had love. Too much of it. Parents who adored him. A little sister, Bree, who thought he could do no wrong. People like to believe trouble has a clear cause. Poverty, abuse, bad neighborhoods. Ryland had none of that. And still, by 17, he was talking about the boys. About loyalty, respect, protection. About people who had his back in ways family never could. When Holt found out they were planning to jump him in, that was the breaking point. The whole family ended up in the living room that night. Cousins, grandparents, even my mom drove 2 hours to be there. It wasn't planned, but it became an intervention anyway. One by one, we spoke. "I love you," I told him, my voice shaking. "But this road doesn't end where you think it does." Maribel cried so hard she could barely breathe. Holt didn't yell. That scared me more than anything. He just leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on his son. "You ain't bad," he said quietly. "You're just lost. And lost kids get eaten alive." That's when Ryland broke. Really broke. He sobbed into his hands like he was 7 again. Like every bad choice finally hit him all at once. He promised he was done. Promised to walk away. Promised he wanted better. For the first time in years, I believed him. So did his parents. That meeting was 3 weeks before his 18th birthday. Long enough to hope. Long enough to plan. The party was Holt's idea. 18, he said, clapping his hands. Man's age. We do it right. They went all out. Food everywhere. Music loud enough to make neighbors peek through their blinds. Family packed into the house and spilling into the yard. Even some of Ryland's old friends showed up. The clean ones, the ones who'd stayed straight. And then there was the truck. A brand new midnight blue F-150 sat in the driveway, gleaming like a promise. Holt waited until after cake to reveal it. Strawberry, Ryland's favorite, frosting everywhere because Bree insisted on helping cut it. "Close your eyes," Maribel said, smiling through her nerves. When Holt dropped the keys into Ryland's hand, the kid froze. "No way," he whispered. "You're messing with me." Holt shook his head. "It's yours." Ryland walked toward that truck, like it might disappear if he moved too fast. Bree sprinted past him, laughing, climbing into the bed like it was a jungle gym. "Best birthday ever," she yelled. We were all smiling. That's what hurts the most. I heard the car before the gunshots. Low engine, slow crawl, tires crunching on gravel just beyond the fence. My head turned without thinking. Then, pop, pop, pop. At first, my mind rejected it. Fireworks, I thought. Someone being stupid. Then glass exploded. The truck's windows shattered inward. Metal screamed. Someone screamed louder. I saw Ryland fall. He hit the ground hard, twisting, blood blooming through his shirt like ink spreading in water. The blue truck was suddenly riddled with holes, smoke curling off the hood. The car tore down the street and vanished before anyone could even shout a plate number. Maribel's scream split the night. Holt dropped beside his son, hands shaking, pressing on wounds he didn't understand. Ryland was still conscious, eyes wide, gasping like the air wouldn't come. "I'm here," Holt kept saying. "Stay with me, buddy. Stay with me." Someone called 911. Someone else was vomiting in the bushes. I stood frozen, ears ringing, staring at the truck. That's when I realized Bree was quiet. Too quiet. "Bree?" my grandma yelled. "Bree, baby? Panic spread instantly. We ran, around the house, back to the driveway, and I saw Holt stand up, lifting something from the truck bed. It took a second to understand it was her. Bree's body was limp, her hair soaked dark, her chest still. Holt screamed her name and collapsed, trying CPR with hands slicked red, switching between her and Ryland, like he couldn't choose which child to save. The paramedics came fast, too fast and too slow at the same time. They worked on Bree the whole ride. She was pronounced dead in the ER. Ryland lived, barely. 3 surgeries, 2 days where doctors only said, wait. When he woke up, they told him about Bree. He didn't scream, didn't cry. He just stared at the wall like something inside him shut off. The police pushed hard. Ryland talked to them more than he talked to us. He said he didn't see faces, but he knew who ordered it. He knew why. Walking away has a price. The case made headlines. A little girl killed at a birthday party. Eventually, someone flipped. Names were given. Arrests made. Nearly a year later, Ryland took the stand, leaning on a cane, his limp permanent. He pointed. He spoke. His voice didn't shake. Both shooters were convicted. Ryland's body healed. His mind never did. Years later, sitting on the porch with beers neither of us wanted, he said quietly, "My dad warned me. Said my chickens would come home to roost. I thought I was different." He stared at the empty street. I wasn't. Sometimes the lesson comes too late. Sometimes it takes everything with it. That night in Cinder Falls taught me this. Love doesn't always save you, but it tries like hell. I don't remember much from my childhood, not clearly anyway. Most of it feels blurred, like static-filled faces without names and places without edges. But there's one image that never faded, no matter how hard I tried to bury it. A small boy sat cross-legged on a kindergarten classroom floor. His face was flushed, eyes swollen, crying so hard he could barely catch his breath. That was the first time I saw Rowan Hale. It was our very first day of school. The room smelled like crayons and disinfectant, and half the kids were melting down because their parents had just walked out like they weren't coming back. Rowan was the loudest. Full panic. Hiccups, snot, sobs that shook his whole body. I wasn't crying. I don't know why. I remember swinging my feet, watching him the way you watch a fire alarm blare. The teacher knelt beside him. Hey, it's okay, buddy." Rowan looked up at her and screamed, "No, it's not." I laughed. Not a big laugh, just a sharp snort. Loud enough. Rowan turned and glared at me, eyes wet and furious. "What are you laughing at?" "I don't know," I said. "You sound like my dad when the truck won't start." That was it. He stopped crying, wiped his face on his sleeve, and stared at me, like I just handed him a secret. We were inseparable after that. Growing up, everyone knew us as a pair. Teachers, neighbors, coaches. Wherever Rowan went, I followed. Trouble wasn't far behind. Rowan was the spark, always grinning, always a few steps ahead. I was quieter, but I never hesitated. If he jumped the fence, I was already climbing. If he talked back, I stood beside him and took the punishment too. By 3rd grade, teachers had a name for us, the Twin Disasters. I still remember Mrs. Calhoun pulling me aside one afternoon. She smelled like burnt coffee and peppermint. "You're a good kid," she said, "but Rowan is going to get you in trouble." I shrugged. He already does. They tried separating us. Different classes, different lunch periods. It never worked. We found each other during bathroom breaks, recess, after school. We'd sit on the curb outside his house, tossing rocks at street signs, talking about dumb dreams, jet skis, moving out west, getting out of town someday. High school changed things. Girls, jobs, responsibilities. We didn't cause trouble anymore, at least not the obvious kind. But every Friday night, we were shoulder to shoulder at the football field, screaming at refs who couldn't hear us. Rowan would slap my back and laugh. Remember when they thought separating us would fix everything? Yeah, I'd say. Poor bastards. Graduation came too fast. He went to college a few states away. I went even farther. Different time zones, different lives, but we kept the ritual. Late night calls, once or twice a month. Him complaining about his roommate. Me talking about classes and the girl I was sure I'd marry. When we came home for holidays, we always met at the same greasy diner off Route 11. Cracked menus, vinyl booths, coffee that tasted burnt no matter the hour. Rowan called it planning treason. If life can hear us, he said once, tapping the table, it'll try to stop us. The night everything ended felt like nothing at all. It was Christmas break, too warm for December, jacket weather that never came. I'd just gotten engaged. My fiancée stayed home, curled up on the couch with my mom. Rowan texted earlier. Party tonight. Old crew. You in? Wouldn't miss it. Good. We gotta talk treason. I left around 8:30, beer in the back seat, windows down. The world felt calm. Too calm. Like it was holding its breath. The party was already loud when I arrived. Music shaking the walls. Laughter spilling into the street. I found Rowan mid-story, arms flying, people hanging on every word. He spotted me and pulled me into a hug that knocked the air out of my chest. Future married man, he grinned. Still breathing, I said. We grabbed beers and slipped onto the balcony. Smoke and cologne hung heavy in the air. You happy? He asked. Yeah, I said, I really am. He nodded. Good. You deserve it. More people crowded onto the balcony. The railing creaked under the weight. Rowan frowned. It's getting packed, he said. Let's head in, I replied. I went first. I opened the door, stepped inside, and everything vanished. Not slowly, not dramatically, just gone. 20-some people disappeared from my sight in less than a second. Reality skipped, like a dropped frame. Then came the sound. A deep, wet crash. Screams cut short. I ran back to the door and looked down, and my world ended. Bodies twisted at impossible angles. Someone crawling, leaving a dark smear behind them. Someone else not moving at all. The sidewalk gleamed under the streetlight. It wasn't rain. It was blood. Rowan, I screamed. Rowan. No answer. I tore down the stairs. The smell hit first. Metallic, sharp, wrong. I stepped over a shoe that didn't have a foot in it anymore. People begged for help. I dropped to my knees, pulling bodies aside, hands slipping, heart pounding. Then I saw his face. Eyes half open, blood running from his mouth and nose. No, I whispered. No, no, no. I shook him. Wake up. Come on. This isn't funny. Nothing. We lifted him. His pulse was weak, but there. He's alive, I said, laughing through tears. I rode with him in the ambulance, holding his hand, talking non-stop. You cried on the first day of school, I said. You were so loud. Don't go quiet on me now. He never squeezed back. Just before dawn, a doctor stopped in front of me. I'm sorry, he said. He had too many injuries. 6 people died that week. 18 more were never the same. 17 years have passed. Sometimes we still meet, sit in silence, say his name so it doesn't disappear. I tell stories about Rowan, the kid who cried on his first day of school, the troublemaker, the brother I chose. And late at night, I imagine him somewhere else, still grinning, still waiting. If there's an afterlife, I hope it has a balcony strong enough to hold us both, because I can't imagine a better eternity
than talking treason with my best friend.
I grew up on Ashford Lane, and for most of my life, absolutely nothing happened there. That's not nostalgia talking. That's just the truth. Ashford Lane sat hidden behind aging strip malls and a railroad spur that hadn't seen a train in decades. It wasn't rich. It wasn't rough. It was the kind of street you drove past without realizing it was there at all. 26 houses, mostly ranch style, mostly owned, not rented. People waved, even if they couldn't remember your name. I was born in the beige house with the peeling green shutters at number 411. Same house my parents still live in. Same bedroom I slept in at 5, 15, and 23. From the day I learned to walk until the year I finally started thinking about leaving, I never once saw a police car roll down our street. No sirens, no domestic calls, no late-night chaos spilling into the road. The loudest thing Ashford Lane ever produced was Mr. Haskins firing up his leaf blower at 7 in the morning like he was doing the block a favor. So when I say it was quiet, I mean quiet. That's why the moving truck stood out so much. It was late May, already warm enough that my window stayed cracked overnight. I remember because I was halfway through my second cup of coffee, scrolling on my phone, when I heard an engine rev harder than it needed to. Then, another. I pulled the curtain aside. A white U-Haul sat crooked in front of number 417. Behind it were 2 motorcycles, big ones, all chrome and muscle. Even idling, they sounded like thunder. 2 guys leaned against them, laughing too loudly, beers already in hand, though it wasn't even noon. Up and down the street, curtains shifted. Mrs. Calder at 405, Old Ron at 419, Pike next door at 413. We all watched. Nobody said a word. New people always drew attention on Ashford Lane, not because we were nosy, but because change didn't come here often. When it did, you felt it. I didn't get a bad feeling right away, just cautious. Later that afternoon, while taking the trash out, one of the motorcycle guys waved me over. "Hey, neighbor." I hesitated, then walked over. He stuck out his hand. "Coulter Vance. Just moved in." His grip was firm, confident, not aggressive. "I'm Ryan," I said. "Nice street," he said, scanning the houses. "Real peaceful." "That's kind of the point," I replied. He laughed. "Don't worry, we're not here to mess it up." A woman stepped out behind him. Dark hair pulled back, hoodie despite the heat. Tired eyes, small smile. "This is Mara," Coulter said. "My wife." "Nice to meet you," she said softly. At the time, I thought nothing of it. That was mistake number 2. The first party came less than a week later, Thursday night, around 9. At first, it was just music, bass low enough to feel more than hear. I put on headphones and told myself it would die down. By 10:30, engines started roaring. Motorcycles, cars, doors slamming, laughter spilling into the street. The neighborhood Facebook group lit up immediately. Anyone else hearing this? Some of us work in the morning. No one replied directly. Nobody ever did. By midnight, bottles clinked near my driveway. I shut the window and went to bed. The noise finally died around 2. The next morning, Pike was outside picking up trash, broken glass, crushed cans. Someone had vomited near his mailbox. "Morning," I said. "Didn't sleep much," he replied. Neither had anyone else. "They apologized," he said finally. "The new folks," he added, "said it got out of hand." "You believe them?" I asked. He shrugged. "I got kids. I gotta believe something." He didn't sound convinced. The parties kept coming. Louder, bigger, motorcycles lining the street, cars blocking driveways. Strangers wandering into yards like they belonged there. One night, I heard Pike knock on their door. "I've asked before," he said.
voice steady. "I got two girls trying to sleep." Coulter laughed. "It's just noise, brother." That's when Pike's shoulders sagged. Pike wasn't violent. He worked himself to the bone. Construction by day, warehouse shifts by night. His wife had left years earlier, leaving him with two daughters and more bills than sleep. Every morning, he walked those girls to the bus stop. Every night, he checked the locks twice. He deserved peace. By December, we all knew something was coming. When the motorcycles started arriving at 4 in the afternoon, my stomach dropped. This one felt heavier. Pike stood on his porch, watching the street fill up. He went inside, came back out, and knocked on 417 one last time. "Please," he said, "just tonight." Coulter smiled. "Relax. It's New Year's." The street was quiet when I woke up. Too quiet. Then, pop, pop. At first I thought fireworks, then screaming. I ran upstairs. The screaming stopped as suddenly as it began. For a second, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Then, I saw her. Mara staggered out of 417, one hand pressed to her chest, the other dragging along the siding. Her sweatshirt was dark, where it shouldn't have been. Blood doesn't splash like in movies. It soaks. She collapsed face first on the lawn. I grabbed my dad's old binoculars and rushed back to the window. She was still moving, barely. Then Pike stepped outside. He didn't rush. That's what haunts me. He walked toward her slowly, gun loose at his side. She tried to push herself up. 3 shots, each one heavier than the last. He stood there, staring down at her. Then he turned the gun on himself. One final shot. When his body hit the ground, my legs gave out. Sirens filled the street minutes later. Red and blue lights, bouncing off houses that had never seen them before. I told the detective everything. He nodded and said, "I'm sorry you had to see that." Days later, the letter surfaced. Pike wrote about exhaustion, about feeling invisible, about his daughters, and about the bicycle, a charity bike with red streamers his oldest rode every day. That morning, he found it crushed at the end of his driveway, tire tracks leading straight through it. His daughters went to live with their aunt. The house at 417 sold twice. Nobody stays long. Ashford Lane is quiet again, but it's not the same. Sometimes at night, I hear engines that aren't there, laughter that doesn't exist anymore. And I think about silence, how easy it is, and how dangerous. Because peace isn't automatic, and sometimes silence kills.